They say that power corrupts, but the most dangerous truth is another. It is the absence of power that destroys you silently. While you cling to the romantic idea of being fair, loyal, and transparent, the game is being played against you. What seems like integrity may actually be strategic ignorance. The problem is not that the world is unfair. It is that you entered a battlefield thinking it was a picnic. The discomfort begins here. You have been trained to avoid power as if it were a disease, but those who fear power become its servants. And the worst? Many are being crushed by rules they did not even know existed. It is as if everyone is dancing at a social party where only a few have been given the manual, and those few manipulate the soundtrack, the lights, and even who enters or leaves the room. If you have ever wondered why less competent people rise faster, why their loyalty is ignored, or why their authenticity seems invisible, you are about to discover that the world is not driven by justice, but by perception, narrative, and control. Power in this game is not about brute domination. It is about accurate reading of reality, emotional control, and above all, positioning. In this video, you will understand how the laws of power are not just Machiavellian strategies to dominate others, but keys to protecting your identity, your reputation, and your own dignity in a system that rewards appearance more than substance. So, if you have ever felt like a sacrificial piece on the chessboard of life, keep reading. Because in the next few minutes, you will learn not only to recognize the game, but to master it with precision. And as Machiavelli said, it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. For a long time, you were taught to believe that loyalty was a supreme virtue, that being there for someone, even in the darkest moments, would make you more worthy, more trustworthy, more human. But what no one told you is that loyalty, when left unchecked, is not a virtue. It is an exploitable vulnerability. It becomes an invisible leash, pulled by whoever knows how to tighten the right emotional knot. And in the game of power, each wrong knot becomes a sentence. Louis XIV, the Sun King, understood this early on. At his court, where the gilded halls hid daily betrayals, he never completely trusted his allies. He divided them. He encouraged intrigues among ministers, forced his courtiers to compete for attention and benefits. And why? Because those who fight among themselves do not conspire against the throne. Louis ruled with splendor and calculated cruelty, keeping everyone close enough to be controlled, but never intimate enough to be dangerous. He knew, in politics, emotional closeness is synonymous with exposure. And exposure, for those who have something to lose, is a constant threat. Robert Greene explains this with almost surgical precision. Never trust your friends too much. Learn to use your enemies. Friends carry expectations. They demand forgiveness, understanding, and above all, space. But what happens when that space is the same space you need to grow? The uncomfortable truth is that often, friends can't stand to see you succeed, not out of malice, but because your success exposes their mediocrity. And that hurts. It hurts so much that even unconsciously, they sabotage you. History has immortalized this pain in the most symbolic gesture of betrayal, Brutus's dagger piercing Julius Caesar's body. Brutus was more than an ally, he was almost a son. And when Caesar fell bloodied and saw Brutus among the conspirators, he didn't cry out in pain, he whispered in astonishment. Because the disappointment of being betrayed by an enemy is expected. But by a friend, that crushes the soul before the body. This same illusion is replicated every day in companies, groups, and intimate relationships. How many times have you trusted someone just because of emotional affinity? Given them an opportunity, shared a weakness, opened doors, and then realized, too late, that that person was using every concession you made as a stepping stone to climb above you? In the corporate environment, the most common mistake made by inexperienced leaders is to promote friends. It seems logical. You trust them, they trust you, so the result should be harmony. But the opposite happens. The friend feels special. It creates a relationship of emotional equality that often ignores the functional hierarchy. When you demand performance, they demand affection. When you criticize, they get offended. And when they make a mistake, you hesitate to correct them. Because friendship becomes an obstacle to leadership. And in a game where every hesitation is 1 point less on the scoreboard, this costs dearly. This does not mean that you should surround yourself only with enemies. It means that you should be selective with the affections you bring into the strategic field. And above all, understand the difference between friendship and alliance. The friend wants to see you succeed. The alliance wants to see both of you succeed, but it knows that, if necessary, it will surpass you without guilt. The alliance is based on respect and exchange. Friendship is often based on comfort and attachment, and no empire was built on comfort. This cold reading may seem brutal, but it is liberating, because from the moment you accept that the game is not played with the heart, but with the mind, you begin to see the pattern. You begin to notice who is by your side out of convenience, who approaches you when you're on a high, who retreats when you talk about goals that are too big. And then, instead of trusting, you observe. Instead of opening up, you select. Instead of betting on affection, you negotiate mutual interest. And this, far from making you cynical, makes you effective. It is a knife with a silk handle and a steel blade. Gentle at first, but deadly when wielded by someone who understands the game better than you. In places of power, and we all are in one, whether we admit it or not, loyalty is not about affection, it is about calculation. And the more blind that loyalty is, the more useful it becomes to those who want to use you as a shield, a ladder, or a sacrifice. In the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, everyone smiled, everyone bowed, but none of those gestures were about affection or admiration. It was a veiled war for prestige, where every courtly smile hid a hidden blade. Anyone who mistook politeness for protection was swallowed up without anyone noticing its absence. Louis understood this. That is why he surrounded himself with loyal sycophants, not because he loved them, but because he knew exactly when to discard them. Sentimental loyalty is a currency of volatile value. Brutus, for example, was almost a son to Julius Caesar. The two grew up together in the Roman political arena, and yet, when the time came, Brutus stabbed himself with the dagger, not out of hatred, but out of opportunity. Even you, Brutus? This phrase became a symbol of betrayal that arises from misplaced trust. But more than a disappointment, it was a lesson. No one is immune to the raw logic of self-interest. Today, knives have changed shape. They no longer shine under the Roman sun, but in corporate corridors, in ambiguous WhatsApp messages, in plasticized smiles at meetings. You put a friend in a position of trust expecting loyalty, but what you get is carelessness, unconscious sabotage, and sometimes deliberate deception. Because the logic of affection does not survive in an ecosystem driven by scarcity of resources and excess of ambition. Robert Greene wrote with surgical precision, "Never trust your friends too much. Learn to use your enemies. Because a friend wants affection. An enemy wants to prove his worth. A friend demands recognition. An enemy delivers results. And in the end, survival on the chessboard of power depends not on emotional bonds, but on strategic alliances." The problem is that most people feel guilty for thinking this way. They think it's inhumane, cold, Machiavellian. But this guilt is a cultural trap, an emotional programming that was inserted into you from an early age, and it weakens you. You were not taught to recognize the gentle manipulation of those who claim to be on your side. You were trained to feel ashamed of protecting yourself. In feudal Japan, samurai swore loyalty to their lord, but this loyalty was not blind. It was calculated. It was broken with honor if the lord became unworthy. In other words, loyalty was conditioned on merit, not on bond. A much more mature code than the toxic sentimentality that romanticizes being together until the end, even when the end is your downfall. Now bring this to your life. Think about the times when you kept someone close just because you felt you owed them something. You stopped confronting, imposing yourself, setting limits, all in the name of supposed fidelity. But deep down you already knew. That person wasn't on your side. They were just benefiting from the space you gave them. It's not about abandoning empathy or becoming an emotional sociopath. It's about stopping being a strategic idiot. Friendship is not armor. Love is not a shield. And those who confuse these things invariably pay the price. Worse, they pay without getting anything in return. Real life, unlike moral tales, doesn't reward good character with justice. It rewards those who understand the game. And in this game, protection doesn't come from affection. It comes from fear, from usefulness, from necessity. Only those who can cause loss are respected. Only those who are too useful to be dismissed are kept around. So stop seeking security in emotional bonds. Start building alliances based on real value, on mutual exchange, on clear strategies. Those who are with you should know why they are there and what they would lose if they were no longer there. And when you have to choose between a friend and a functional ally, remember, friendship comforts you, but the right ally protects you. And in the minefield of power, comfort is a distraction, and distraction is fatal. The transition to the next level of the game starts here. Realizing that it's not enough to be good, you have to be perceived as valuable. And value in the game of power is rarely in those who give themselves away. It's in those who position themselves coolly, scan with intelligence, and act with precision. The next step is to understand why, even if you're talented, you can still be invisible. And what really separates those who have presence from those who go unnoticed. You can be brilliant, honest, and competent, and still be forgotten. Worse, be ignored by people who are more mediocre, louder, more strategic. Because in the real world, it's not those who are who win, those who appear to be who win. The harsh truth is that power is not won by essence, but by perception. And whoever controls how you are seen manipulates the entire game. Here begins one of the most subtle and most lethal laws of power. Be bigger in appearance than you are in reality until it becomes real. Sounds superficial? Maybe, but that's exactly why it works. The world doesn't deal with your essence, it reacts to your image. And that image is shaped by the symbols you convey, the words you choose, the silence you impose, and most importantly, by the stories that are not told about you. In other words, being an open book is the quickest way to be thrown away like a pamphlet. Napoleon Bonaparte understood this like few others. He was small, physically, but his presence in historical accounts was colossal. This did not happen by chance. Napoleon knew that the aura that surrounded him was part of his weapon of war. He used silence as a shield and ambiguity as a sword. He rarely revealed his intentions clearly. Every word was measured, every gesture was studied, every absence calculated. The result? His allies feared him, his enemies overestimated him, and the people idolized him. Even when he failed, his image remained intact long enough for him to rebuild himself. This strategy has a name. Robert Greene calls it Law 6, attract attention at all costs. But attention here does not mean scandal. It means narrative control, mastery of your own legend. Machiavelli once said, "It is not necessary to be virtuous. It is enough to appear to be." Because for most people, what appears is what is, and fighting against that is like trying to swim across the ocean against the current of human nature. Perception is the field where reputations are built and destroyed. And here comes an essential point. Reputation is not vanity. It is shielding. It is the invisible force field that protects or exposes. Powerful people treat their reputation as an asset. They protect it with claws. They build it with patience. They defend it with ferocity. Because they know a well-built reputation can make more than 1,000 arguments. And a public stain, no matter how small, can destroy a decade of results. Machiavelli was demonized for centuries. They called him manipulative, Machiavellian, unethical. But anyone who reads The Prince intelligently realizes something more subtle. He does not defend evil. He describes the world as it is. And in doing so, he offers tools for those who do not want to be swallowed up. One of these tools is precisely the control of perception. He advises princes to appear pious, compassionate, faithful, even when they need to act harshly. Why? Because the masses judge with their eyes, not with their brains. And those who dominate the public gaze shape the future. In today's world, this logic has not changed. It has simply become digitalized. On Instagram, on LinkedIn, in meeting rooms, on the newsfeed, appearance still rules. Mediocre people rise quickly because they understand one thing. If they appear essential, they will be treated as such. Meanwhile, silent geniuses wait to be noticed. But the game doesn't reward those who wait. It rewards those who impose themselves, with image, with narrative, with presence. This may seem harsh, even cynical, but it is liberating, because it gives you power over your own legend. You don't need to be perfect. You need to appear prepared, consistent, solid. You need to create symbols that communicate who you are, even in silence. Clothing is a symbol. Posture is a symbol. Tone of voice, response time, what you keep quiet about, everything communicates. Absence also has presence. Silence can speak louder than verbosity, if it is used as a tactic, not as an escape. And here's the big mistake most people make, thinking that authenticity means spilling the beans, showing fragility as if it were charm, being transparent as if the world were a welcoming confessional. It is not. Excessive exposure does not humanize, it trivializes, and what is trivialized loses value. Therefore, don't show everything. Create curiosity, create gaps. Those who reveal too much become empty. Those who reveal too little become enigmas. And enigmas are irresistible. Pop culture understands this better than intellectuals. That's why characters like Thomas Shelby, Don Draper, or even Heath Ledger's Joker fascinate. They don't shout. They don't explain themselves. They impose presence. They carry a dense silence, full of intention. And that creates magnetism, because mystery activates the imagination. And the imagination of others is worth more than any description you can give of yourself. The world does not deal with your essence. It reacts to your image. And this image is shaped by the symbols you convey, the words you choose, and above all, by the strategic absences you impose. Those who show too much, trivialize. Those who remain silent at the right time, intrigue. And in the game of power, intrigue is gold. Napoleon Bonaparte understood this perfectly. He used silence as armor. He rarely reacted emotionally, and his words were measured like ammunition. In meetings with his generals, he observed more than he spoke. And when he spoke, he left gaps. Gaps that others filled with projections, fears, and interpretations. Napoleon's silence was a mirror. Others saw in him what they feared or desired. This was his invisible weapon. You don't need to have Napoleon's army to apply the same strategy. Today, in a work meeting, on a social network, even in an informal conversation, what you say is less important than what you don't say. Strategic omission is not cowardice. It is the architecture of perception. When everyone talks, those who remain silent stand out. When everyone exposes, those who protect their image create an aura. This is where Machiavelli, the master of political perception, comes in. In The Prince, he does not say that a ruler should be cruel or a liar. He says that he should appear virtuous, appear generous, appear fair. Because politics, like social life, is like theater. And those who refuse to act on this stage become extras in their own story. Machiavelli understood the game as it is, not as we would like it to be. His most disconcerting phrase, "Men judge more by their eyes than by their hands," reveals the essence of this logic. You can do a lot, but if no one sees it, none of it counts. At the same time, you can do almost nothing, but if perception is in your favor, power gravitates around you. This is a lesson that power strategists of the past had already understood. In ancient China, Taoist masters said that a true ruler was like water, present but invisible, shaping everything without imposing himself. The emperor was an image, a myth, a presence that inspired more by what he represented than by what he said. Today, the most respected CEOs are not those who talk all the time. They are those who speak little, but each word resonates. They are those who appear little, but each appearance is loaded with symbolic impact. Modern culture, obsessed with authenticity, hides a trap, confusing transparency with total exposure. And herein lies one of the most poisonous contradictions of the digital age. Extreme exposure, the kind that gives everything, all the time, does not create connection. It creates banality. You become predictable, controllable, disposable. Excessive presence breaks the mystery, and with it, respect. People of value create scarcity. They show up when necessary. They say the essential. They create rituals. They choose moments of silence as if they were writing a symphony with strategic pauses. Because presence is not about quantity. It's about context, intention, and rarity. Look at the most influential figures in the world. They don't justify themselves. They don't respond to everything. They don't engage in empty debates to please. Because they know that, in the theater of perception, those who enter the scene too much become part of the scenery. Only those who know when to disappear are protagonists. You've seen this pattern before. The average guy who dares, who asserts himself, even without all the credentials, who presents himself, takes a stand, takes the plunge, and against all logic, is promoted, applauded, respected. Meanwhile, the silent geniuses continue to wait for the right time. But here's the brutal truth. Waiting too long is what makes you forgotten. The power game doesn't favor those who are good. It favors those who move. Alexander the Great was only 20 years old when he began his march to conquer the world. They called him crazy, impulsive, suicidal. But he understood something that cautious generals didn't. In the field of influence, the perception of strength is more valuable than strength itself. His audacity created legend. His initiative shaped the destiny of empires. Robert Greene, in his raw reading of reality, writes, "Timidity is more dangerous than ill-calculated boldness. Because those who constantly retreat communicate only one thing, that they are asking for permission to exist. And no one respects those who demand space. The figures who dominate the scene, whether on a stage, at a negotiating table, or in a decision-making room, are those who invade the environment as if they were already part of it. This is the psychological effect of projected authority. Contrary to what many people think, audacity is not an irrational impulse. It is calculation. It is about assessing the moment, identifying the leadership vacuum, and occupying the space before someone bolder does. The difference between an arrogant person and an audacious strategist is precision. Those who act without sensitivity to the context make themselves look ridiculous. But those who hesitate until they are sure miss the window. The modern world moves in short attention cycles, fleeting opportunities, and spaces disputed by those who appear before they are ready. This is a contradiction that destroys many talented people, the myth of eternal preparation. Those who think they will only be able to impose themselves when they are 100% ready. But what defines social power is not invisible preparation, it is visible exposure. The world does not reward those who are better prepared. It rewards those who show themselves to be most indispensable now. In the Italian Renaissance, brilliant courtiers kept to themselves in the shadows, waiting to be called to the front. But those who jumped first, even without full favor, created their own light. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He knew that power was a dance between appearance, action, and timing. It's not enough to be cunning. You have to appear confident and act before hesitation devours your chance. And that goes for you. In any environment where influence is at stake, whether it's a new project, a leadership opportunity, a chance to reposition yourself, hesitation pushes you into oblivion. Bold people aren't necessarily more competent. They've just learned to act as if they were. And that, paradoxically, makes them competent in the eyes of others. This logic bothers those who were raised to wait their turn, to be polite, modest, patient. But the system isn't fair. It rewards proactivity, visibility, and firmness. And these three characteristics together make up the core of calculated boldness. Don't mistake this attitude for rudeness or an inflated ego. True audacity is silent. It doesn't shout, it acts. It doesn't apologize for existing. It doesn't explain itself for being ambitious. It doesn't disguise its desire to conquer. Instead, it positions itself naturally, as if the place were already its own, and with that, it builds its own legitimacy. Observe the most respected figures in your circle. What they have in common is not technical genius. It is presence, courage, boldness in gesture, clarity in gaze. These are the qualities that attract attention, command respect, and open doors that merit alone could never open. And here is the turning point. It is not enough to be strategic and perceptive if you do not have the courage to act. Knowledge without action turns into frustration. A plan without execution turns into regret. And fear, if not tamed, turns into resentment against those who dared in your place. Most of the underutilized talents in the world do not die for lack of competence. They die suffocated by excessive prudence. Brilliant people who watched others rise while waiting for the ideal moment. But the ideal moment doesn't exist. It's built with imperfect decisions, courageous timing, and action before permission. So if there's one lesson that closes this cycle, it's this. Power isn't given, it's taken. And to take it, you have to move firmly before it's validated. Space isn't ceded, it's conquered. Authority isn't inherited, it's projected. And respect isn't the result of waiting, it's a response to action. And the moment you understand this, hesitation becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. Silence stops being protection and becomes invisibility. And fear, if not channeled, puts you on a pedestal of neutrality that no one worships. They just ignore it.